Welcome to the BEEVisio training. Let's fit a shelf with rolling rails into the flow rack. For this, let's take a stop, a GPB1. We're going to give that a slope straight away. That's why I'm switching it on there. I'll select the pan axis. I'll move that upwards. Then an input field should appear. I'll enter 3 degrees. Switch off triball, F15, and the joints will be mounted at an angle on the roller rail. Next, I'll fit a 40/36W free. I'll start by extending the guide rail to a specific length right down to the point. That means I'll right-click on the length modification point. Then the context menu appears and says, select 2 point with the left mouse button. Choose a good snap point here. That's the cross at the joints. Then the roller rail is already in place. We can see that the cross tube is actually sitting a bit too low inside, because I've already got a slope in there. That's a correction I'll have to make later once I've got a chance. I'm fitting my GPA up here without a stop. And now I can go in and say, I'll take my ball from my crossbar and place it my crossbar up like this, so that it doesn't actually have any cutoff at the top. But that's also because of 2/10. We don't need to do much there, because now the length, I can now switch on the triball, select the longitudinal axis, select the center point, and specify the center point. That would be completely precise, but 2/10 of a millimeter doesn't really matter here. The roller guide hasn't been deflected yet, and that's deliberate. I could also set that to a point now and say I'll move it all the way over, and then use the arrow key on my keyboard to move all the way to the right of the cursor. First delete the decimal point and enter -2 millimeters. The reason for this is simple. We don't want to fit the roller rails with a press fit. If, whilst building it, I later realize that the slope is too steep and I want to lower this transverse axis, then, in principle, my roller rail will become slightly longer because it rotates downwards past the front pivot point, and then the gap will get narrower and narrower. That's why it's good to have at least 1 or 2 millimeters of clearance here at the back. We'd say there can easily be between 2 and 6 millimeters of clearance at the back without any problems. The roller rail mount can easily accommodate that. Right, so now we've got a roller guide in place. We can now fit a side guide onto it by saying, I'll just an ARG set it to -40, then press enter. Then I can have a look at what we've got. That's the ARG 4030BL. I'll probably even use the caps for these, then I can be sure I'll place them straight on top. Normally, it already has the correct magnetic point at the front. Here's what I'm going to do. I'll select the roller rail. I can't see this measurement here, but I can check it in the properties pane. It's 1264, and if I click on it now and say, for example, I'll put in 1100. Wrong measurement. I didn't enter 64, but 46. Then I also the correct length of the side guide, which is exactly 100 millimeters shorter than the roller track. Right, so I've actually already got a pair of roller tracks. Next, I'd assemble this roller rail as assembly. That means I'll start by taking a joint at the front, press the Shift key on the keyboard, take the roller rail, side guide, and the rear joints and turn it into an assembly. The next step is to rebuild exactly the same component from scratch. I could also mirror it, and I could bring in an aid by clicking on the boxes, and use containers, specifically the 400 by 600 ones. I'll just drag it in. I've now got several options. I can also adjust the height here. So I can't change the dimensions 400 by 600 as they're fixed, but I can choose the height. I'll select 180 here and click OK. The container has now aligned itself with my side guide, just like my roller track. At the top, it's not flat, but basically has individual rollers up there. I select my container and switch on tribal. First of all, select the container using the selected control button. I'll do that. We did say that we want the container basically aligned with this one, and now I could go ahead and reflect it. So now it's 400 wide, 600 deep. Now I could say, with respect to the axis of reflection, I'll reflect the object itself. So now we have here, I'll adjust the height of the container again in terms of height, and say that the point should be exactly at the top edge of the roller guide. We've now got it exactly flush with the side guide. As a rule, we always leave a gap of 5 millimeters. And now I'm going to position the container further forward, just as it should be in practice, so that it stops at the front. Turn off tribal, right. Now I've got a simple way to mirror this assembly, which I've already put together, over to the right using the container's mirror axis. To do this, I'll switch on tribal. That's why it was important at the start, when I was assembling the roller rail assembly, that I use the frontmost container, joints, at the front, because the first component I select during the assembly process is the one onto which the trackball will eventually be mounted. This also means that I now have the triball sitting on top at the front, not on the back and not somewhere in the middle of the roller track, but it's simply positioned at the front. To use that as the mirror point now, I basically have to detach it. That means I use the spacebar on the keyboard to away. Look at that. The color has now changed to white. Now I'll select the axis again and specify that I want the center point to be on a center edge, select my container, and reactivate my triball. Now I've moved my triball, and now I have a clean center axis, a mirror axis, and I can now use that to select my vertical axis, select my reference point to the right, and say that I want to mirror what's currently highlighted here, around the central mirror axis, and not just mirror it, but copy it as well. And then my second assembly takes over. I'll switch tribal off. Now I can see how many 2 containers we actually wanted, one after the other. I can now copy that. I'd say exactly 600. Then the structure is slightly longer than the containers. That's not really such a big deal though. Yes, I'd say turn them into an assembly, left and right tracks. Plus select the containers whilst holding down the shift key, select an assembly, and then I'll switch tribal on again and say, I'll move all this over, as far as I have space. And I'll go over there and then take the whole assembly and copy it over there as well. Click copy here. Can I also set a fixed dimension to 480? Turn off the tribal. Now I could say I'll do it in a more neutral way too. I'd also like to have a bit of room on both sides here, so that I can perhaps reach into the containers, depending on how it's going. Because they usually have front access pockets, so I don't need to reach in from the side at all. I could now move it a little across. Take a small measurement. Good. And now, in principle, I've already positioned both tracks like this. Save. Next, I'll use the front one this time, whilst holding down the shift key. This assembly, and this assembly, and place them all as a single layer. Now I have a complete shelf layer. I'll save that again. Now I'll remove the top 2, as I don't need them like this anymore. I'm thinking about how high my top and bottom layers need to be. Normally, they say at least 500 millimeters. In other words, I'm measuring from here to here. I'm just under 400 millimeters. That means I'm now moving the whole layer up by a good 100 millimeters further up. Exit measurement mode. Exactly, once we're sure. Now we need to be a bit careful. I've deliberately chosen to select my cross pipes first when merging the whole layer. Then I've selected my rail or both cross pipes first, and then merged my roller track sections on the left and right, before turning it all into an assembly. But because I selected the cross pipes first, my tribal from that assembly is now sitting on top of that cross pipe up there, and that's why it's now aligned vertically, because my cross pipe is vertically aligned, whereas my pair of roller rails already have an incline up there. If I'd selected the roller rail first in the assembly selection, or my containers, then, in principle, my initial selection would take precedence, and my tribal would also be at an angle corresponding to the gradient I've set there. And if I then say, I'll add my tribal, select my direction axis, and say, please move upwards, then it will shift upwards by 3 degrees. That's why it's important, when assembling components, to always check which item I'm adding first. which one is perfectly aligned along the vertical axis within the coordinate system, and please select that one first. So, we said we want to move it up by at least 100 millimeters, but we can also move it up by 150 millimeters. Right, that's the first dimension, and now it depends on what components are inside. Large ones, small ones. Do we need to remove any components, or do we have to take the containers out? That should actually have been clarified beforehand. We normally say 3 on top of each other. That means I'll just leave a suitable gap and say, up to here, link by copying, so that whenever I make a change to the layer, it's corrected across all of them straight away. I'm setting the number to 2 rather than 1 because we need 3 layers in total, and I'm also using an even measurement here. That means I'll use what it says here, 320 millimeters. And now you can also see that the components are linked to one another, as they're highlighted in purple here. You can also see this here in the structure tree. The components here have an arrow and are, in principle, linked for that reason. This means that if I now make a change to one of the layers, it will normally affect the other layers as well. So that's why you have to be careful when doing this with the links. It might be that I want to make a change to one layer, but then it affects all the layers, and I think, what on earth is going on? So just think, do I need it or don't I? Thank you for watching, and see you in the next BEEVisio training session.